Hey everyone, it's Horror Free for All, and I hope you're doing well today. So, I just got done watching a limited release horror film from 2025, technically 2024, since it debuted at a film festival last year. But I thought I would go ahead and make a review of this film because I don't see anybody talking about it, and I have a lot to say about it. This film was written by Samuel Kasky, Dan Kuntz, and Joseph Kahn, and also directed by Joseph Kahn, who you might remember from the cult classic Detention. He was the director of that. I think that movie came out in 2011. And the very infamous disaster of an action movie called Torque, which I think majority of you have heard of in the past if you are familiar with that film. But I'm going to talk about today Joseph Kahn's newest movie, Ick. Now, Ick stars some, former celebrities from the 2000s you might recognize, particularly Brandon Routh, Mina Suvari, and it stars relative newcomers Melina Wiseman and Harrison. I want to say his name is Corn, something like that. I forget, but it starts with a C. Um, yeah, this movie, y'all. I caught a trailer in a movie I was watching, I think a couple weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago, of this film. And I looked at my fiance and I said, we have to go see this. And I looked it up, and sure enough, there was a Fathom event showing this movie for 3 days only, I guess across all Regal cinemas, which I am an unlimited member of. So I decided to go support Joseph Kahn and the people involved with this movie. And I wanted to check it out to see if I would like it and possibly buy a physical copy when it inevitably ends up in a place like Walmart or something. And I have to say, I've seen Detention and I've seen Torque. And after watching this has to be my favorite Joseph Kahn movie. And I'm thinking in the theater after I was done watching it and made it through the credits and watched the making of snippet that's at the end, why Joseph Kahn hasn't been able to come back into mainstream filmmaking. But then I remembered Torque and the backstory behind that film and how apparently it was a lot of back and forth and him putting his foot down saying, no, I'm going to do things my way. If you want this movie, you're going to have to do it my way. And it caused such a big hiccup, and the movie performed so badly, got terrible reviews that Hollywood might have blackballed him. So I don't know if this movie has some contempt because of that, or maybe Joseph Kahn, he is definitely a product of, 2000s culture. If you see this movie is an ode to millennial culture from the mid 2000s, pretty much literally. I say after this, let Joseph Kahn have another try at this. I think modern horror, especially modern horror comedies like this film, I think could use his voice because he has some stuff to say, even though it's not the most creative thing ever, and some things are kind of already been there, done that with what this film kind of brings to the table in terms of like jokes and what have you, or even the commentary and under the belly of the writing, what's going on there. But this was an entertaining movie. It might not be constructively sound. It might not be the best paced thing ever. It might not even be a genuinely good movie. But one thing I've learned in cinema, especially with like horror comedies, is that if you leave me after watching it the first time wanting to go back and watch it again, you did something right. And I would say if you're looking for a fun horror comedy, my favorite one last year was Deer Camp 86, which was a hidden gem that I took a flyer on in Walmart. This movie, if you don't catch it at Fathom, wait for it to come out of Walmart in October or maybe September, August, whatever it comes out, and pick up a physical copy for this of this for your collection and watch it. I think if you're a millennial like me, I'm 31 years old. This is going to tickle your heartstrings. There are a lot of mid 2000s rock bops from bands that you might recognize, like Creed, Wheatus, All American Rejects, Blink 182, Paramore. It has a very heavy pop punk soundtrack if you're into that. um, and that can be a blessing and a curse with this movie in a lot of regards. But yeah, this was a wild time. Probably the wildest and weirdest horror movie I've seen in some time. So yeah, y'all need to go check this out if you haven't. So that being said, I'm gonna kind of run down Ick, give you what you can expect out of the film, and then get into my review. So, Ick, the film, revolves around this washed up former football player named Hank. And in the beginning of the film, we literally speed run for about 10 minutes in wild pacing. I guess his peak of his existence or life, which revolved around him being the high school quarterback in this small town. And he has this head cheerleader girlfriend named Stacy, who's played by Mina Savari. And you see them like hooking up by a cliffside and her watching him play football at the football games. And them, I guess, gallivanting around town together, having sex and whatnot. Um, but there's also these bushels around the town in various places of what appears to be plants, and they look kind of alien in nature. But the beginning does not touch on it at all. It's just a thing in the movie at first, and we get basically run through. Hank is planning on leaving this small town to go away to college, and he wants to stay with Stacy, and he's gonna, get a full ride at a college playing football, and he's gonna be able to provide for them once he's done with school and whatnot. Maybe make it to the NFL or something. And Stacy seems to be supportive, but she's also considered like the quote unquote town slut. And she, I guess, is implied to be like, you know, wide open sign, anybody can come in, kind of a girl. Um, and maybe that's why, Hank is with her or something. But anyways, there's a flashback that leads up to prom night, and they're announced prom king and queen, and he lets this his girlfriend Stacy dance with this I guess nerdy Asian guy who didn't get a dance all night, and they're having fun, right? And this kind of introduces the two of them, if you can get my drift. This is a common mid 2000s teen romance comedy trope that I guess Joseph Kahn wanted to bring into this movie. But um, you should keep in mind that we see Brandon Routh and Mina Suvari and all these people who are probably in their 40s, pushing 50s, dressed up as teenagers, and they have the mid 2000s emo haircut. I mean, you have All American Rejects Swing playing through the whole time. You have like Weedus, Teenage Dirtbag playing, Blink 182, What's My Age Again, stuff like that. Um, but eventually, it comes to the game after prom, and this is, I guess, the final football game of the season. And it turns out Stacy breaks up with Hank before the game, and this distracts him. And while he's on the field, one of the plant bushels distracts him, and he gets his foot caught in it, and he snaps his leg in a very gnarly injury as he onlooks his ex girlfriend making out with this nerdy Asian guy. So we get a sense, and once we get caught up to present day, where it's revealed that he's, gone through, his horrific leg injury, having to live at home with his dad. He never got to go to college. He's also, working as a janitor. The school apparently needs more teachers, so they put him through night school or whatnot, and get him some extra schooling, and he becomes qualified to become a teacher. And when we get caught up to present, he essentially saying like fuck or shit and distracts the class, who are a bunch of like, I guess, later Gen Z kids that are on their cell phone acting like pricks, making sexual jokes that are kind of funny, I'm not going to lie. And we get to see him kind of working as a high school science teacher. And there's this girl in his class named Grace, who is a senior, and he has a weird relationship with her because he hasn't been able to hold um, her mom out of his life ever since that fateful night on the football field. It turns out Grace's mom is actually his ex-girlfriend Stacy, and we see Hank in his car. He still has a picture of him and Stacy from high school. His car is still the same car from his high school days as well, but it's all beat up and it can barely fucking start because it's a piece of shit now, and there's problems with the engine and what have you. And we also get to see, Grace and her friends kind of interact as well. But Hank, we see that he lives alone. He lives at his father's former house. He's now like, I guess, an older orphan. He lost both of his parents. He hasn't been able to leave this town, which has this weird plant life growing around it. And around this point of the movie, Hank kind of drops a backstory about the plants, and it's essentially described that this plant is said to only be living in this town, in I guess wherever USA, and they don't know if it came from a meteorite or if it's an ancient species or what. All they do know is that it exists there, and in the daylight it has like no activity, but at night it tends to move around and act up a little bit more. But eventually, once the movie starts to kick on, we see that Hank is just trying to buy a bar, and he's actually a recovering alcoholic, and he goes to AA meetings and all of that, trying to turn his life around, trying to find happiness again. But him buying this bar probably will bring out former vices. And ironically, he's trying to buy the bar from this real estate agent who happens to be um, his ex girlfriend Stacy's husband. And the both of them bring Grace to the bar, and Grace has, like I said, this weird relationship with her teacher. And at first, you're like, where are they going with this? Like, are they implying that these two are kind of like hooking up or something? But very quickly, you kind of get the vibe that they're going to be going this route where maybe Hank is actually Grace's father, which actually ends up being a main plot point later on. Mild spoiler, but it is what it is. So Hank acquires the bar, and he's trying to, I guess, accrue the funds to fix it up and do it up good. I guess to honor his father, who I guess either worked there or ran it before. I don't know, and never really explains. Well, we get a bunch of like abrupt cuts in this movie. It goes back and forth between, Hank's high school days early on, where he's like flashbacking to memories with Stacy and whatnot, and you see this throughout the movie. It's kind of inconsequential. I'm just going to stick to the heartbeat and the core of it for this portion, so that way, in case you want to watch it, you'll see what I'm saying. That this movie is very sporadic and very, I want to say poorly paced, but it's hit the ground running the whole time. So we zigzag back and forth a few times, going into the context of, Hank's depression, Hank being this washed up athlete, Hank being this recovering alcoholic, right? He's just gotten the shit stick, and now, in his adult life, he's walking around with a gimp leg because of the injury from that football game when he was a senior in high school. Well, eventually one night, I guess it's around the senior prom for Grace's class, and there's going to be a party and whatnot. This plant life starts to kind of act up, and it turns out that the Hank knows a little more about science that he lets on. He's not like the brightest bulb in the box because he did, get pretty much taught in like I guess like a school classroom after hours in like a community setting for his teacher education or whatnot. But he had his class essentially give petri dishes as like DNA samples for swabs for an experiment later on, and he takes Grace's after a conversation when he has that he has with Stacy and her husband at the bar when he buys it, and he gets like the suspicion that Grace might be his daughter because of the time of conception. And it turns out that after they broke up, Stacy and Hank had a one-time fling about 5 years after they graduated, and that was the around the time where Stacy would have conceived Grace. So he seems to think that he might be her father, and he submits, and I shit you not, a paternity test that he grabs from like a Walgreens knockoff and ships it to um and ships it to a website. I forget the name of it, but it's fucking hilarious. It's like not a real website, but you can tell it's like supposed to be a joke. Um and he's like, I guess got the results, and it without looking, he's like, I'm about 50%, maybe 75% sure I'm Grace's dad. And he doesn't know how to break this information to her. Um, Once he notices that the plant life called ICK, which is the reason for the title of the movie, has started to move around in the night a lot more than it has in like the past, I guess, 18, 20 years. And he notices once he's left his bar after doing this little trial run about how active the plant life is becoming, he has this interaction with these two police officers that look essentially possessed by this stuff. And they are disturbing, and like how they're trying to like get him to essentially touch them and I guess join the ick and like touch the ick. And there's like these running gags and like blink and you miss it kind of jokes where you see these TikTokers trying to eat it and stuff like that. That possibly implies that they started the infection of all the people or something. And there's this Latin teacher, or I guess his Spanish teacher in school, who might have a like I want to fuck you crush on Hank. And there's some jokes to be had with that little relationship there when they meet up in like the teachers lounge or whatnot. But she's in the back of the cop car with these cops, and they appear to be possessed by the ick, and they are these grotesque, you know, mostly practical but enhanced by CGI zombie looking creatures. And they essentially try to assimilate Hank, and he breaks out of the cop car, gets into his piece of shit car, and darts off. And he tries to call Grace because he's now thinking that Grace might be his daughter. He has to try to save her. And there's this whole joke where he calls this girl that he used to hook up with, I guess, instead of his student slash daughter. Well, Grace is at this house party that she's throwing, I guess, before prom, and essentially all hell breaks loose once Hank arrives at the party. He's essentially telling the kids, hey, they have to get out from the dark. They need to go into some light because the stuff doesn't like light, as the experiment from before would show you. And the kids are like, yeah, fuck off, dude. Why are you here? Your attempt at Grace seems kind of like creepy. And they're talking in like this really Gen Z kind of way, but you can tell that Joseph Kahn and the other writers wrote these characters to be parodies and kind of like a not another teen movie kind of way. And there's this one character, Grace's boyfriend Dylan, who's essentially like supposed to be the woke character of the movie, but he's like the white knight archetype where he's trying to stick up for minorities and telling people like, hey, that's ableist, hey, that's misogynist, hey, that's sexist. And but he's essentially weaponizing that to use it to get to girls who I guess are more prone to believe that. You know what I mean? Like it's fucking crazy how Joseph Kahn and all these people are coming after essentially like the woke type with just this archetype. But it goes beyond that further. Like there's other side characters in this movie, like other teachers who are openly like conservative types that are like they're anti-vaccine. They don't want to take the ick vaccine and stuff like that. You can clearly tell that they're trying to put the events of this movie onto stuff like COVID and what was going on during the pandemic and all that. So everybody's getting under fire with the humor and the jokes and the archetypes of this movie. And they're definitely played up extreme at times, especially with this character Dylan. But Dylan essentially tells Hank to fuck off, and the whole party cheers, and they continue to have their fun and festivities. But the it comes through and starts to essentially either rip people apart in brutal ways with practical and CGI as well, or they're assimilating them and making them become part of the hive mind, which is another thing this movie is coming to talk about in some ways. Or you have people trying to run away. Now, I haven't mentioned these two side characters because they're not really the most important thing, but Grace does have this best friend who's like this goth chick that's into this weird guy with long hair. He kind of looks like Jay from Jay and Silent Bob. And he's like drawn this capuchin monkey or something. And they bond over that. And Grace essentially tells her to like, tell him that he can touch her boob if he goes to prom with her. This is the kind of humor we're talking about here. Very mid 2000s, very like, peak Kevin Smith or Seth Rogen kind of writing, which tickled my heartstrings because it definitely reminded me of comedies from the mid 2000s when jokes like that were landing. And they're funny too, but they're at the house party. You see them going on their own escapade, and then you see Dylan and Grace getting into a fight. and Grace, decides to, go off into her own thing. And then Dylan, being the good boyfriend that he is, tries to hook up with this other girl who got in a fight with her boyfriend. And he's using his, shithead pickup lines that are being essentially like jokes. And the ick comes through, and we see who gets possessed and whatnot. And it's basically down to, Grace, Hank, Grace's friend, and this guy that she's into are seemingly the only people in town that haven't been infected yet, maybe minus some adults. Well, when this event happens and all this carnage and what have you happens during the daylight, it seems like when the plants recede, the kids can come back to life, or they they seem fine, but they have this itch and this urge to, I guess, be with the ick after they've done it one time. And we see Hank go to his AA meeting, and these adults that went through that wild night as well, off camera, of course, are obviously infected. And Hank's like, "I'm out. I don't want to be a part of this." And then all the people who haven't been infected, they're brought to this like Walmart knockoff place, and they're told by this military personnel that are coming in that they're going to need to move over to the next town. And Stacy and her husband, who are Grace's parents, are basically like, "No, fuck y'all. We don't need to leave. Prom is tomorrow night. I'm going to have my kids go to prom, and my daughter's going to win prom queen." So the army people are like, "All right, fuck it. If y'all don't want to leave, y'all are just going to have to deal with the ick." So round two happens the day after, right? And we see essentially prom night commence. Grace goes to prom with her boyfriend Dylan, but Dylan, of course, is infected by the ick, and we know that Grace is in danger. Then all hell breaks loose at prom night, and some adults and other side characters get some really fucked up shit happening to them. And it leads basically down to Grace's friend, the guy that Grace's friend is into, and Hank as like the four token people that haven't been infected, at least that we need to care about. And they end up on the football field, and there's a huge, I guess, climactic event involving Dylan being, I guess, the leader of the infected, trying to come up to them and assimilate everybody into this hive mind. But once daylight breaks, they find a way out of the situation on top of this tower. And without knowing too much what's going to come further, all we know is that a plane does come from the government and drop some type of bomb. I don't know if that's supposed to be like an ick pesticide or whatnot, but there's no follow up and there's never anything explained. So it's safe to assume that the ick was taken care of. And we see Hank and Grace at the end. I should mention this before. Grace's parents possibly were assimilated at different points in the movie in their own ways. And I guess Grace and Hank are talking and like having this connection, and they're finally ready to look at the results. But before we get to see what the results are, the film fades to black. And then we get some more mid 2000s bops, and the film ends with, at least in my experience in the theater, the making of credits. So that, in a nutshell, is what I got to experience with Ick. I don't know if you're going to have a different experience. Maybe there could be a director's cut or something when it releases to physical media, if it does at all. But yeah, I'll be buying it to see if there's any changes moving forward. But yeah, so I have a lot to talk about with the Ick. It's an all over the place movie, y'all. I'm gonna be upfront. I know that this is probably going to be an acquired taste film, given that the director made films such as Torque, which some people till this day will defend as a so bad it's good movie, or Detention, which people say is a cult classic, teenage horror comedy kind of thing. I think Ick is another film kind of like Detention. But what I like about this movie, despite a lot of problems it has constructively, is that it is unapologetically coming to talk about hive mind nature, collectivism, people talking like, brain rot TikTokers, people not having their own opinions, people trying to be a part of a larger group than being an individual. Um, and that's the core message of the movie. And all these characters that we get to experience in the movie, at least with like the, I guess, the four people that make it to the end without being assimilated at least once. Grace, she's like Hank when he was her age. She wants to go to college. She wants to get out of the town. When Dylan becomes assimilated, her boyfriend, he tells her, he's like, well, I don't plan to go to college anymore. I want to stay in this town. I want to be, you know, with you here. I think we belong here. But there's other things deeper than that going on for Dylan. He's joined the hive mind. He's joined this collective where everybody thinks the same in this small town and can't change their perspective or whatnot. And like some people might be like, well, that sounds like it's bashing, conservative towns and whatnot. No, 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 no. It is, it is everybody under the sun, wherever you fall on the political spectrum, is getting bashed in this movie with comedy. And there's archetypes for everyone. And they're all done in such a funny way because obviously these characters are caricatures, but they have a little more to them in the through line. And like I said, this is kind of like if you took a concept like The Blob or James Gunn's Slither and you blended it with humor that you would see in movies like Not Another Teen Movie. Or it's kind of like The Faculty meets Not Another Teen Movie. That's actually a better example. That's legit this movie. It's just, there's something about it that works because you get these caricatures, you get why they're like this, and you get the joke, and it registers. There's so many what the fuck moments with these characters throughout this movie, and actual good dialogue when they're not played up to be apexing on their caricature or their stereotype for the sake of a gag or a punchline. Like obviously my two favorite characters of this movie, the through line characters, were Hank and Grace. They were phenomenal. I think Melina Wiseman, she needs to be in more movies. She was great in this. She had a lot of charisma. She looks like I want to say a dime store Sabrina Carpenter, but she's like the acting version of Sabrina Carpenter. I think if you put her maybe in some more horror films and put her in some more mainstream stuff, people would really like her. And seeing Brandon Routh, play this like washed up football player and giving it his all in this film, I thought he was really entertaining. Mina Suvari, seeing her play Grace's mom, like this slutty alpha bitch from her time in high school, and now she's basically turned into a big old fucking cunt, to say the least, in her adult life, is hilarious. Like I've never really seen her play a character like this. I grew up seeing her in movies like American Pie and this Amy Heckerling movie Loser and maybe American Beauty. I like seeing people from this time period in movies from time to time, especially if I haven't seen them. Um, so she was entertaining too. I will say that some characters can get kind of grating and cringy because of the characters in the stereotype going on, but even characters like Dylan, who I guess are supposed to be cringy and annoying, depending on I guess where you fall with things, he is like essentially hilarious, and then he's also turned into a villain because he's like the leader of the hive mind. He's literally the guy with the least individuality in the whole town. So that makes the reason why he becomes the leader of it, which ties to the symmetry of the story. I don't think people will give credit to this movie when it comes to this, but this movie does have an impactful message, and it does tie that very well with the horror and what it's trying to do with its action and its monster creatures. Which brings me to the Ick itself. While the Ick has no real backstory and there's really no tangibility of how it got to this town, why it's only living in this town or what have you, it has a lot of cool abilities. And I like that the film kind of stays in a lane with it and doesn't go too far and make it unbelievable. So a part of its abilities is that in the day, it's basically like a normal plant. It has to absorb and use photosynthesis to gather nutrients or I guess energy. And it's said later on in the movie that once it builds up enough energy, it can start to move around out of this dormant stage. The dormant stage could be around, 18 to 20 years. And then when they get into their kinetic stage, it can last up to 4 to 6 years before they go back into their more dormant uh, state, where I guess people can like coexist without getting too harmed by them. But when the film, introduces the ick in modern times, when it's not using the flashbacks, the ick, I guess, is just starting to turn on, and within 2 days, the entire town's already been compromised. So this should tell you that the government sees this as a humongous problem because they don't know the origin of it, they don't know where it comes from. It's most likely alien, and it has symbiotic attributes where the person infected needs it to feel a certain way, and it like becomes addicted to it. And I guess the film, I guess, is talking about ick in like two different ways. You can see like the COVID parallel, where the ick is essentially just an illness that people are afraid of catching, but the illness itself, I think, is the second thing, and that is brain rot, like, or the lack of individuality. That's what the ick is supposed to represent. But as a monster itself, what it's able to do to you, it causes people to do disturbing things. Like if their personality is like fun and energetic, it will kind of abuse that and make them hyperactive. Like there's this one scene with a cop when he's possessed by the ick, where he's just like smiling and bashing his head into the windshield, and his face is getting progressively bloodier, and it's like his skin is kind of falling off. There's mix of practical and CGI, and we haven't talked about the CGI yet, and I'll get into that shortly. It looks creepy, and the characters, when they're infected, they have like a deeper voice, and they're trying desperately to get into anybody who's not infected. They're trying to tell everybody that the ick is the way to go. You need to be on this and get on everybody's page, and we can be a happy town forever. And the survivors see right through that bullshit. So yeah, the ick has symbiotic abilities. It's able to move around in the dark, and that's the only time it's able to move. If there's UV light, it can't move and synthesize energy at the same time. So when the sunlight comes out, they have to stop moving and synthesize because they can't differentiate between both actions. So that's the only way to make them dormant, or I guess stop infecting people. And once it kills people or assimilates them, once the sunlight comes, they're able to, I guess, to regurgitate them or just keep them permanently a part of itself. It's kind of vague and loose on that, but that's another ability it has. And it also has the power to bring back the dead. There's a scene where Hank sees his father, who he thought was dead. His, I guess, corpse has been kept alive by the ick this whole time. And there's a scene in the bar where Hank feels like he has to take care of him in the bar, and you'll see what comes of that. But yeah, the ick has a variety of powers, but they all stick within the same range of believability as the other powers, right? And the film, for the most part, picks a lane with it and sticks with it, so it's pretty consistent. And like I said, they do some solid horror bits here, with some of the makeup and what they're able to do with characters. Now, getting to the kills are hit or miss because there's some that are really rushed through, and there's some that are really graphic. But all of them seem like they're enhanced by CGI. And yes, there is CGI blood in the movie. There is practical blood in the movie. It just depends on the shot. So it's a give and take with that. But for the most part, if you're expecting a creature feature, especially when you have like a zombie like town invasion type of story, you want to see some carnage, you want to see some blood. You'll get that here, but like I said, you're going to get that blend of practical and CGI. And for the most part, it's done pretty well. And for one last compliment for this movie is just the vibes. They really captured mid 2000s humor in this movie. The humor really does land. This is one of the funniest horror comedies I've seen in some time. I was laughing my ass off. A lot of the times from the absurdity of the jokes and how crass they were. I mean, this humor, I have not seen humor like this in a movie in the movie theaters since like 2008. And it was great shit because it's literally not afraid to piss people off. And I miss movies like this, man. I was laughing, I was smiling, I was probably blushing ear to ear. My fiance was having a good time next to me. It was just something like we both looked at each other like, yeah, we're gonna watch this again. because it was funny and actually achieved what it was trying to do on that front. And the soundtrack, holy crap, man! If you're a millennial, you're gonna love this soundtrack. Incredible. Even though, getting into negatives, I said earlier the soundtrack is a blessing and a curse for this movie. One of the most annoying things this film does is that because of the pacing being atrocious at a lot of the time, let's just put it out there. The pacing is all over the place. It's a fucking ADHD movie. doesn't It doesn't have a fucking pause button. You'll be in like one scene, and then there's scenes that I guess Joseph Kahn added in just to throw in a bop that he liked from the 2000s that seemingly has nothing to do with the scene before it. And then once the scene ends, it abruptly cuts back into the action. He does this multiple times in the movie just to throw in fucking songs. And it's irritating. But I like the songs that he chose. I will say that. But constructively, it made it hard to follow, especially in like the first half of the movie. I'm like, what the fuck am I watching? Join with the pace. Yeah, those two things were less than to be desired. I will say, when it comes to, I guess, the ramping of the story and the logic behind it, not a lot of characters in this movie are smart. But then again, I think it's done on purpose because I think Joseph Kahn and co were going for these people are fucking stupid. They're all hive mind individuals. They're literal brain rot. I get that to a degree. But holy crap, these people make the dumbest decisions in every way possible at any given turn of the film, especially when like the army comes in and tells them to go to this nearby town where all these supplies are going to be. They're like, no, we're going to fucking stay so our kids can have a prom. Like, what the fuck, man? And like, some of these people aren't even possessed yet. They're just dumb naturally. I'm just like, these people don't really feel real. But then again, that's not my biggest gripe. But it is causation for a good amount of the movie. You have to see the inciting incident for the reason why this shit keeps continuing is because of stupidity and dumb shit. That was annoying. I would have rather seen a more subdued or maybe a more tame or grounded take when it came to, I guess, ramping up into the next day and how to go about it further. But Joseph Kahn's a chaotic director, and I kind of, after finding out that he was the director of it initially and knowing his background, I don't expect anything less from this guy when it comes with that. Which brings me to my last negative with the movie, honestly, and it's probably going to be the biggest negative for a lot of people, is that the CGI, the over reliance on CGI enhancements does take away from the violence and the gore at times. The movie also has a weird color correction. I don't know if it was my theater or maybe it was, uh, Fathom Events copy of it. I don't know, but the color correction seemed a little bit too dark, and it was hard to see what the fuck you were looking at in some shots. But yeah, the CGI was hit or miss. Like, there's some bad CGI blood, but there's also some good one, uh, good CGI blood here and there. So yeah, it's very hit or miss. But if you hate CGI gore in movies, you're probably not gonna like this film. just on that premise alone, or CGI monsters or whatnot. But like I said, there is a blend there to kind of balance that out. But all in all, if I had to rate ICK from 2025 from a 0 to 5 star basis, given those problems, they did kind of weigh heavily for me. But like I said, I was just thoroughly entertained, and this is one of those movies that I find genuinely so bad it's good in some aspects, but also genuinely good because it has some substance to it. It's talking about something legitimate. I think it's relevant for today, and I don't think it will age poorly because this movie is scrutinizing beliefs that have been going back to the 80s, 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and the 2020s. So I think this movie will have some relevancy, at least for like 20 something years. I don't see this movie possibly ever getting past a cult status or maybe a cult classic. You're not going to see a lot of merch for this film or not, or something like that. This is going to have to be a film that catches word of mouth, or maybe reviewers catch it and people start recommending it. maybe, just maybe, it might spawn something down the line for Joseph Kahn, or maybe an Ick 2, but we'll see when it gets there. But for this film's own basis, I'd probably give this movie maybe like a 3.75 out of 5 stars. I think that this is a fun guilty pleasure film. I don't have anything else to say besides that. I know it's acquired taste. So I can totally see if you hate this movie when you watch it. I can totally see if you love it. It all depends on I guess, your mind frame or what have you, state of mind, maybe what time period you grew up in. But I would give my hard stamp of approval. Go watch this film if you haven't. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Ick from 2025. Let me know down in the comment section if you've seen Ick. What's your thoughts on it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Are you indifferent on it? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.